All right, everyone, get ready because we're starting a pretty big journey. 61 episodes taking a deep dive into Western philosophy. It'll be like, that cross-country road trip you always wanted to take.
Yeah.
This is kind of like that, but for your mind.
And what better place to start than ancient Greece? You know, all those sun-drenched islands and epic poems? Oh, and it's the birthplace of democracy. That's where philosophy first started out. And it still affects us today, even after all this time.
So we're going way back in time to ancient Greece to meet this guy named Aristotle. But before we get into all of Aristotle's greatest hits, we need to set the scene a little bit. Okay, so imagine Greece, but not as one big country. Instead, it's like a bunch of independent city-states. They each have their own thing going on.
Yeah, it's like a neighborhood block party. But everybody brought their own dish, you know? You've got Athens, which is super busy with trade and democracy and open debate. Then there's Sparta. They were all about military discipline and that whole no pain, no gain thing.
So you're saying ancient Greece was a total melting pot of ideas and different ways of living?
Exactly. And in the middle of all of this, a new way of thinking pops up. Philosophy. And we meet these really important thinkers, Socrates, Plato, and then of course our main man, Aristotle. And they were asking these huge questions like, what even is reality? What's the point of life? How should we live?
Whoa, hold on. We're going from 0 to 60 here. Can we break this down a little?
Yeah.
Who were these guys and what were they all about?
Well, Socrates was really famous for his question everything attitude. I always picture him as that friend who's always playing devil's advocate, always pushing you to think harder. He didn't write much down, but his student Plato took good notes.
And Plato was the one who was all about abstract ideas like justice and beauty and truth, right?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
He thought those ideals existed in a perfect world, beyond the physical world we live in. It was kind of like a blueprint for the ideal world. Then you have Aristotle, who was Plato's student. He's like, hold on a sec, let's not get too out there. He said, let's look around, observe the world, and use logic to figure things out.
So Aristotle was more practical and down to earth.
Exactly. Aristotle was all about studying nature, analyzing how things work and figuring out how we can all live our best lives, right here, right now. And that brings us to his famous book, Nicomachean Ethics.
Okay, so let's unpack this ethics thing. What is it all about?
Well, in a nutshell, it's Aristotle's guide to living a good and fulfilling life. He goes into these big questions like, what is happiness? What does it mean to be a good person? And how can we achieve our full potential?
So it's like a self-help book from ancient Greece. Sign me up.
You and everybody else. But here's the thing. Aristotle wasn't about those quick fixes or easy answers. He believed that true happiness, or eudaimonia as he called it comes from cultivating virtues.
Wait, virtues like being honest and brave and all that?
Exactly. Things like courage and temperance and justice and wisdom. Aristotle believed that when we develop these virtues, we become better people. And we can live more fulfilling lives.
But wait, doesn't everyone have their own idea of a good life? What makes me happy might not be the same thing that makes you happy, right?
That's true. But Aristotle wasn't saying there's one-size-fits-all approach. He thought that while the specifics might be different, the core principles of virtue are universal.
So being virtuous isn't about following a bunch of rules. It's more about developing good character traits that can help us get through life's ups and downs.
You're getting it. And Aristotle had this really cool idea about how to develop those virtues. He called it the golden mean.
Okay, I'm listening. What's the golden mean? Does it involve winning the lottery?
Not quite. The golden mean is all about finding balance in everything. Aristotle believed that virtue is about finding that middle ground between two extremes.
Can you give me an example?
Sure, let's take courage. Aristotle believed that true courage isn't about being reckless or totally fearless. It's about finding the right balance between cowardice and recklessness. It's about being able to face your fears, but also knowing when to be careful.
So it's not just about being brave, it's about being smart about it too.
Exactly. And this applies to other virtues too. Think about generosity. A really generous person isn't someone who gives away everything they have, but they're also not someone who hoards all their stuff. It's all about finding that middle ground between being stingy and being extravagant.
Okay, I see how this golden mean idea could be helpful in everyday life.
It's a pretty powerful concept, right? And it's just one of the many cool things Aristotle talks about in his ethics. He challenges us to think about what it really means to live a good life, not just for ourselves, but for the community as a whole.
So how do we connect all of this back to ancient Greece? I mean, it's super interesting, but why should anyone today care about what some philosopher from over 2,000 years ago had to say?
Well, for starters, Aristotle's emphasis on reason and observation and logic, it laid the groundwork for the scientific method. His ideas about politics and ethics and the natural world, they influenced thinkers for centuries.
So he wasn't just some boring old philosopher.
Yeah.
He actually made a difference.
Oh, absolutely. But beyond his historical influence, Aristotle's ideas about happiness and virtue and living a good life, they're timeless. They resonate with people no matter what their background or beliefs are.
It's like he tapped into something fundamental about being human.
Exactly. And that's what makes exploring his work so rewarding. It's not just about learning a bunch of facts. It's about getting involved with ideas that can help us live more fulfilling and meaningful lives.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this is a 61-part series. There is so much to unpack here.
Oh, we're just getting started. But before we go any deeper into Aristotle's ethics, there's one more thing I want to point out. Something that makes his work so interesting. You see, Aristotle wasn't just a super smart guy. He was like a master storyteller. He knew how to make his ideas come to life. You know, he used vivid examples and scenarios that people could relate to.
So he wasn't just throwing out these dry philosophical theories. He was making it fun.
Exactly. That's what makes reading his stuff so enjoyable. It's not just some boring intellectual thing. It's like an invitation to explore all the complicated parts of being human.
I like that. It makes philosophy seem less intimidating and more like something we can all connect with.
And that's the thing about philosophy. It's for everyone. It's about asking those big questions, challenging what we think we know, and figuring out how to have a good life. And Aristotle was amazing at guiding us through all that.
Okay, so we talked about eudaimonia and those super important virtues and the golden mean. What else did Aristotle have to say about living a good life?
Well, he believed that virtue isn't something we're born with. It's something we build up through practice and habit. He compared it to learning a skill, like playing an instrument or mastering some kind of craft.
So you're saying we don't just suddenly become virtuous, it takes work and dedication.
Exactly. It's about making those choices day after day to act in a way that shows virtue. And just like learning any skill, it takes time and patience and being willing to learn from your mistakes.
That makes sense. But how are we supposed to know what the right choices are? Especially when we have to make those tough decisions or we're dealing with ethical dilemmas.
That's where Aristotle's idea of practical wisdom comes in. He called it phronesis. It's basically being able to make good decisions in real-life situations.
So it's not enough to just know what's right in theory. You have to be able to actually use that knowledge in the real world.
You got it. Practical wisdom is all about understanding the little details of a situation. You have to think about what might happen because of your actions, and then choose what to do based on your values and your commitment to virtue.
It sounds like something you develop over time with experience and thinking back on things.
Absolutely. Aristotle thought that practical wisdom comes from observing things and having mentors, and most importantly, from messing up and learning from it.
Okay, but hold on a sec.
Yeah.
We would talk about all these virtues. But how did Aristotle actually define them? Like, what specific qualities did he think were important for a virtuous person to have?
That's a great question. Aristotle saw virtue as a disposition, like a tendency to act in a certain way. It's not just about doing the right thing every now and then. It's about consistently being a person who reflects those good qualities.
So it's about being true to who you are and living in a way that lines up with what you believe in.
Exactly. And Aristotle believed that virtuous people aren't just good for themselves. They're good for society, too. He saw virtue as the foundation for strong communities and a fair society.
Now, you mentioned before that Aristotle was such a great storyteller.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of how he used stories to explain his ideas?
Of course. One of my favorite examples is when he talks about courage in the Nicomachean Ethics. Instead of just defining courage in some abstract way, he tells the story of Achilles, you know, the legendary Greek warrior.
Oh, yeah, Achilles.
Hey.
Wasn't he the one with that weak spot on his heel?
That's him. Aristotle uses Achilles' story to show different ideas about courage. He points out that even though Achilles was super brave in battle, he was also driven by anger and wanting glory.
So he was fearless, but was he really courageous?
That's exactly what Aristotle wants us to think about. He uses Achilles as an example to show that real courage isn't just about being physically brave. It's also about having the mental strength to do what's right, even when it's hard.
So it's a reminder that true strength comes from inside, not just from being physically strong.
Exactly. And that's what makes Aristotle's writing so interesting. He uses those powerful examples and relatable stories to connect his philosophical ideas to what it means to be human.
It makes you realize that philosophy isn't just about these abstract theories. It's about understanding ourselves and the world we live in.
Precisely. And as we keep exploring Aristotle's ethics, we'll see how he weaves together all these insights insights about human nature and virtue and living a good life. It's like he created this tapestry of wisdom that still inspires us today.
I'm ready to see what else we uncover in this tapestry. But before we get back into Aristotle's ideas, I think there's something we should talk about. We've been focusing on the positive side of his philosophy. But like any great thinker, Aristotle has people who disagree with him.
Of course, every philosophical theory is going to have some criticism, and thinking about those criticisms is part of what makes studying philosophy so interesting.
So what are some of the things people criticize about Aristotle's ethics?
Well, one common criticism is that his focus on virtue can seem a bit too focused on the individual. Critics say that it puts too much emphasis on developing your own character, and doesn't really address our responsibilities to others or the importance of social justice.
It's like that classic debate about individual rights versus the needs of the many.
Exactly. And it's a fair point. Some people also question whether Aristotle's idea of the golden mean always works. They say that finding that perfect balance between two extremes can be really hard, especially in complicated situations where there are a bunch of different values clashing.
It's like that saying, easier said than done. Sometimes figuring out the right thing to do isn't so straightforward.
Absolutely. It's important to recognize those criticisms and really think about them. It's by grappling with those different points of view that we get a better understanding of Aristotle's ideas and how they relate to our lives today.
So it's not about blindly agreeing with everything Aristotle said. It's more about using his ideas as a starting point for critical thinking and self-reflection.
You got it. That's the beauty of philosophy. It encourages us to ask questions, to challenge things, and to always be improving our understanding of ourselves and the world.
I'm really starting to appreciate how deep and complex Aristotle's thinking is. It's not about memorizing a bunch of rules. It's about this lifelong journey of learning and growing.
Exactly. And remember, we're looking at these ideas within the context of ancient Greece, a society that was brilliant in many ways, but also had its problems.
You're talking about stuff like slavery and how women didn't have many rights, right? Things that we definitely don't agree with today.
Exactly. It's important to be critical when looking at Aristotle's work. We have to acknowledge both the genius of his insights and the limitations of the time he lived in.
It reminds us that even the smartest people are shaped by the world they live in, and that we should always question things and work towards a more fair and just world.
Now, before we move on from this part of our deep dive, I want to go back to something we mentioned earlier. Remember how we talked about how Aristotle loved to observe things and how interested he was in the natural world?
Yeah, he was all about studying how things actually worked in real life, not just thinking about abstract concepts.
Exactly. And you can see that practical side of him when he talks about friendship. For Aristotle, friendship wasn't just something nice to have. It was a crucial part of living a fulfilling life.
Okay, I'm interested. How did Aristotle view friendship? Was it just about having buddies to hang out with?
It was more than that. Aristotle believed that true friendship is built on respect for each other, shared values, and genuinely caring about each other's well-being. He even went as far as to put different kinds of friendships into categories.
Oh, really? This is getting interesting. Tell me more about these different types of friendship.
Sure. He identified three main types: friendships of utility, friendships of pleasure, and friendships of virtue. Friendships of utility are those that are based on mutual benefit, like business partners or classmates who study together.
So it's like a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of deal.
Exactly. Then there are friendships of pleasure. These are the friendships where you enjoy doing things together, like friends who go to concerts, play sports, or just hang out and have fun.
Those are the friends you want to have at a party.
For sure. But for Aristotle, the most important and long-lasting type of friendship was the friendship of virtue.
Okay, this is where it gets really good. What did Aristotle mean by a friendship of virtue?
Friendships of virtue are those that are built on a deep appreciation for each other's character and a shared commitment to living a virtuous life. These friends push each other to be better people, they support each other through thick and thin, and they inspire each other to strive for excellence.
It's like having a built-in accountability partner on your journey towards eudaimonia.
Exactly. And Aristotle believed that these friendships are hard to find and very special. They take time and effort and a real desire to see the best in each other.
It makes you realize that true friendship is more than just surface-level stuff. It's about shared values, respect for each other, and a commitment to helping each other grow.
Exactly. And what Aristotle says about the importance of friendship reminds us that we're not meant to go through life alone. We need to build meaningful relationships that support us on our path towards virtue and happiness.
It makes you think about how much richer our lives are when we have people to share things with, both the good times and the bad.
Absolutely. And Aristotle wasn't just talking about having a ton of friends. He emphasized that it's more about the quality of friendships than the quantity.
So it's not about collecting friends like they're trophies. It's about building deep and meaningful connections with people who share our values and who challenge us to be better.
Exactly. He believed that those friendships of virtue, those relationships built on mutual respect and that shared goal of living a good life, those are the ones that really feed our souls and help us reach eudaimonia.
It's a reminder that we should be careful about the relationships we build and to really value those friends who inspire us to become better people.
Now, as we finish up our deep dive into Aristotle's ethics, I want to leave you with something to think about. We've covered so much, from ancient Greece to the core of Aristotle's ideas about happiness, virtue, friendship, and the good life. But this is just the start of our journey.
All right, so we're back, and we're going to keep going with this deep dive into Aristotle's ethics. Before the break, we were talking about those different kinds of friendships. It really got me thinking about all my own relationships, and like how they fit into my life.
It's pretty cool how Aristotle's ideas can make you think about stuff like that. He was really good at connecting those big philosophical ideas to real-life experiences.
Totally. And speaking of real life, you said that Aristotle thought friendship wasn't just some extra thing. He thought it was a key ingredient for having a good life. Why did he think friendship was so important?
Well, Aristotle saw friendship as like a support system, but also something that helps you grow. He believed that true friends help us develop all those important virtues we talked about. They give you encouragement when you're having a hard time. And they keep you in check when you start straying from your values. Oh, and they celebrate with you when you succeed.
It's like having your own personal cheer squad.
Yeah.
But one that's not afraid to tell you when you're messing up.
Exactly. And remember how we were talking about how Aristotle emphasized practicing virtue, like making it a habit? Well, he thought friendships were the perfect setting to put those virtues into action.
So it's not enough to just know what the right thing is. You need to have people in your life who encourage you to actually do it every single day.
You got it. And when we try to be better friends ourselves, we also improve our own character. And we help those around us, too. It's like this cool back and forth of growing and supporting each other.
I guess it makes you realize that friendships aren't just about having fun. They're about helping each other become the best versions of ourselves.
Right, and that brings us back to Aristotle's idea of eudaimonia. Remember that state of flourishing and fulfillment that he thought was the ultimate goal? Well, he saw friendship as a big part of achieving that.
So you're saying we can't really be happy and fulfilled without those connections with others?
That's what Aristotle believed. He saw humans as naturally social. And he thought that strong friendships give us this feeling of belonging and purpose and joy. All of that contributes to our overall well-being.
When you think about it, our lives are definitely richer when we have people to share things with, the good and the bad.
Absolutely. And Aristotle wasn't saying you need to have a ton of friends. He was more about quality over quantity when it comes to friendships.
So it's not about collecting friends like they're some kind of prize. It's about building those deep and meaningful relationships with people who get us and who push us to be better.
You got it. He thought that those friendships of virtue, the ones based on mutual respect and wanting to live a good life, those are the ones that really make a difference in our lives and help us reach eudaimonia.
It's a good reminder that we should be picky about the people we let into our lives and to value the friends who make us want to be better.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Aristotle's ethics, I want to leave you with something to think about. We've covered a lot of ground, from ancient Greece to the core of Aristotle's ideas about happiness, virtue, friendship, and what it means to live a good life. But this is just the start of our journey.
Wait, there's more. I feel like my brain is already full.
Don't worry, we'll take it one step at a time. Over the next 60 episodes, we're going to explore how Aristotle's ideas influenced so many thinkers throughout history, and we'll see how his ideas still affect how we understand the world today.
So it's like we're following the trail of Aristotle's ideas through time.
Exactly. We'll see how his ideas about virtue, happiness, and the good life have been debated and challenged and reinterpreted across different times and cultures. It's going to be an amazing adventure.
I can't wait. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I want to go back to something you said before. You mentioned how Aristotle's ideas can make you reflect on your own life. What's one key takeaway you hope our listeners will think about today?
That's a great question. I think the most important thing to remember is that for Aristotle, living a good life wasn't about reaching some far-off goal or achieving some perfect state of being. It was all about the journey itself.
So it's about trying to be a little better every day. about making those small but important choices that line up with our values.
Exactly. It's about developing those virtues, nurturing those strong friendships, and using our practical wisdom to handle whatever challenges and opportunities come our way.
It's like a reminder that we're all still works in progress, and that trying to live a good life is an adventure that never really ends.
You got it. So as you go through your day, I encourage you to think about what Aristotle said. Ask yourself, how can I be brave today? What little act of kindness can I do for a friend? How can I use my smarts to make a positive difference in the world?
Those are some really great questions to think about. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive into Aristotle's ethics. I'm already excited for the next one.
It was my pleasure. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep exploring, and keep striving for that good life.